Okay, well, hey, welcome. There we go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to give Christian an opportunity to talk to you about his project today. Christian started as master gardener in South Florida and got interested in invasive plants and other invasive species. Then he came up to Gainesville and he worked and is still working in Gainesville at the UF in the assessment for non-native plants. He's also working on his master's degree here at UF, and he's worked with FWC as well. And here now he's the coordinator for a project called the UF Invasive Species Survey Group. And that's going to be utilizing citizen scientists such as yourselves to help monitor the spread or the control of invasive plants in North Florida in particular. So, Christian, with that, I'll just turn it over to you. And if you have anything else you'd like to tell the group about yourself, don't hesitate.
Um, yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Dr. Main. I really appreciate it. And thank you and Caitlin both for kind of hosting this for me. I appreciate you putting together this webinar and inviting your Master Naturalist to it. And for that, thank you to the Master Naturalists who are here too. I appreciate your time coming here to listen about this new program. I think that this is going to be a really exciting opportunity for Master Naturalists to partner with this program to do some good with the ongoing efforts for managing invasive species in Florida. So as Dr. Main mentioned, my name is Christian and I'm the coordinator for this Invasive Species Survey Group. With this presentation, I want to give you kind of a quick overview, kind of some quick context for invasive species issues generally in the state. And then I'm going to cover the survey group, what it is, and how you can get involved with us. It'd be great if I could. There we go. All right. So before we go further, I find that it's usually good practice to lay out a pretty clear definition of invasive species so that we're all kind of operating on the same level of understanding. So invasive species are those species which are non-native to an area, have been introduced, and are causing or are likely to cause negative impacts. This definition largely comes from an executive order in the 1990s that was issued by then President Bill Clinton. And some permutations of this definition are, there are permutations of this definition, but this is kind of, I think, the most expansive and clear that we can work with. If you want to have a discussion about terminology, we can talk about that another time. So I think it's probably safe to say that for Florida residents, for all of us living in Florida, most of us are aware that Florida has something of an invasive species problem. So I grabbed just a handful of news articles that have been published in the last few days, showing just the amount of reporting that happens on invasive species. A lot of these tend to focus, especially lately, on sort of big charismatic invasive species like Burmese pythons and Nile monitors and lionfish and so on. But a lot of the invasive species in Florida are also plants. And while people may think that plants are not necessarily as damaging on the same degree of Burmese pythons or lionfish, the reality is that invasive plants do have kind of an outsized impact on our state. So we have an estimated 168 invasive plant species in our state, kind of depending on what definition or organizations you look at when they're defining invasive species or invasive plant species. Those invasive plant species threaten some 43% of our nationally listed threatened and endangered species, and this is primarily through affecting habitat loss or habitat degradation for those threatened and endangered species. Within Florida, we also lose about $110 million per year in agricultural yields just to invasive weeds. And the state of Florida actually produces, or not produces, but spends a huge chunk of money in managing invasive plants. So between 2008 and 2014, which was a few years ago and money has changed, the value of money has changed since then, the state of Florida had spent an average of $44 million per year managing invasive plants. And that, keep in mind, is just the state government. It doesn't include a number of cities, counties, or federal agencies that are managing invasives. And it also doesn't cover the homeowners that are, in many cases, also managing invasives in their landscapes. So Florida is something we consider to be an invasive species hotspot. So this map comes from a research paper out of 2017, and it shows the regions of the world that have the highest numbers of invasive species relative to other areas. So this map includes all taxa, so wildlife, insects, not just plants. And from this map, from the hotspot in this map, we can tell that Florida is one of those regions where there is a disproportionately high number of invasive species. Now, these species arrive through a number of different ways, both intentionally and unintentionally, but primarily it's through the movement of trade and through the movement of people. And that kind of, you can see that reinforced when we look at the hotspots here. A lot of those red areas tend to be island nations or just areas that have lots of trade. And that, again, reinforces this idea that invasive species move with human activity. We also know that the rate of new species introductions is not really slowing down. So the likelihood that we have new invasive species that are going to show up in our state is pretty high. And honestly, all this serves to just kind of introduce this idea that invasive species are a really widespread issue in Florida and that we need help to respond to the scale of this issue. Zooming in on Florida specifically, I pulled this map. This is just a map of conservation lands in the north half of our state. The different shades of properties just kind of indicate different agencies or organizations that manage those lands. And in some cases, these are lands that have been proposed for conservation that are not yet in active conservation. This is just to kind of give a little bit more context and to make you think about the acreage that's in conservation or likely to become in conservation in Florida, and to think about the relatively few number of individuals who are out here actually conducting invasive species management across this huge acreage. We also know that land management is a really big job, right? Land managers have a lot of responsibilities. I pulled just this list that's not at all exhaustive of some of the major activities that land managers are responsible for, from prescribed fire to conducting threatened species conservation efforts. In a lot of cases, they're managing land to produce high-quality wildlife habitat. In many cases, these are working lands, and they also are responsible for timber production on these properties. And in a lot of them, there's also opportunities for recreation. And so they can be like trail maintenance and just access that you need to keep in mind when you're managing all these properties. Regardless of what mixture of goals here that a piece of property is being managed for, you're going to have to think about invasive species management. It's kind of ubiquitous. Everybody has to do it. But when it comes to invasive species, it can be really challenging to allocate the amount of time and resources to their management when you already have so many other tasks that you're responsible for doing. So from some conversations that we've had with land managers, we've identified a handful of barriers to effective invasive species management. And I've just summarized a quick handful of them here. So this first group that I have, these are more technical barriers, and these include things like making sure that you know what invasive species are on your property. It's also, like I just mentioned, there's always something new in the pipeline, it seems, when it comes to invasive and new and emerging invasive species. And so it helps to kind of be tapped into a network of folks so that you can stay appraised of kind of what's going on. There's also a huge technical discussion around what kind of data needs to be collected and how invasive species should be reported. And different agencies and organizations all have different goals and different tools that they use for this process. And that just kind of creates a lot of complexity when it comes to figuring out how to effectively manage invasive species. Some of the more intuitive barriers that we also have are these like time and resource barriers, which I've also already touched on briefly. It's a little bit more straightforward, right? Land managers are busy people, and invasive species management only takes up a small slice of the pie when it comes to their like total overall land goals and their resource allocation. But this reality really butts heads when you have invasive species or large infestations of invasive species, which often cannot be spot treated. Instead, you have to frequently revisit sites and retreat sites, and oftentimes conduct really long-term monitoring. This is even more so true when you're managing huge acreages, right? So I have this picture here of Apalachicola National Forest, and I show all of the management units within the forest. And keep in mind, it's not a huge team of people who manage all this land. So if they're managing something in one of these management units, there is a good chance they're not going to be able to go back and evaluate whether it's still there or not until they get back to their next cycle of management, which could be a year from now, 2 years from now, or even longer sometimes. So from here, we were curious about ways that we can address those barriers, and more specifically, if we could utilize volunteers and citizen scientists to help us fill some of those gaps in invasive species management. And so from those gaps, just to kind of summarize, we know that land managers need to know what species they need to manage. They need to know where those species occur, and then they need to know if their treatments or their management activities are working. And this to us just sounded like a really good opportunity for citizen science data collection. So there are already a lot of tools or citizen science tools out there that involve the public in reporting or tracking invasive species distributions. So how is what we're doing any different, right? So these tools are really like fantastic, right? They're great for people to report invasive species. This is a great start. But if we really want to support land managers the way that they need, we need to find a way to focus volunteer efforts. So our plan is to really build a volunteer infrastructure and then to use one of these tools, in our case, EdMaps, and this allows for a different level of volunteer engagement and a different quality or tier of data quality. So while we still want to support individuals who just want to go out and report invasive species while they're out, recreationally, for example, we also want to be able to have a trained group of volunteers who are able and capable of conducting targeted surveys for targeted species. And then we really want that the data that we collect can then go directly to land management practitioners so that they can use it to develop, implement, and improve their invasive species management activities. So one of the ways that we're doing this, right, is we're recruiting volunteers, and that's why I'm here talking to you. But there's some steps that we're kind of going through to make sure that our efforts are different. And the first of those is that we're training our citizen scientists, right? So there's training opportunities available for you. I think sometimes there is this perception that citizen science can be less reliable or less accurate. But research shows that those kinds of concerns can be managed by just training your volunteers to ensure that the work that they're doing is consistent and up to standard. And that's one of those really exciting parts about this program is that we're putting together an online short course for our volunteers to take that will make sure that they know what they need in order to be effective volunteers. So volunteers who are interested in joining the survey group will have access to a free online short course that can be completed in just a couple of hours. The short course is going to cover all the material that you need to be an effective volunteer. The course is broken up into 3 modules. The first covers what I call like Invasive Species 101. And this covers kind of more broad context about invasive species issues. It talks about terminology and definitions. And it just gives you more context as you understand your role as a volunteer. The second module focuses on plant identification. And so we're talking to land managers and learning what species they're concerned about. And then we're teaching you how to identify them specifically. And then that third module then focuses on EdMaps, which is, again, the online tool that we're using to report invasive species. And we really want to make sure that you as volunteers know how to record and upload high-quality data into EdMaps. If you become a volunteer, we'll talk about EdMaps in greater detail on what it is, but I want to just provide a quick overview. EdMaps stands for Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. This is an all-taxa invasive species occurrence database. So what that means, all taxa is all different species, right? Not just plants. We're doing wildlife and what have you, although our project focuses on plants. And then you can report invasive species in this database, and it ties it with a geographic location. One of the cool things about this program is it has continental coverage. While it's focused in North America, there is increasingly support for data that's coming out of Canada and Mexico, so that makes it kind of unique. And then one of the other things that's kind of unique about it is that there are a lot of different ways to interface with it. And what I mean by this is I mentioned some of those citizen science tools earlier, right? Like WildSpotter or EdMaps, or I've Got One is a Florida-specific version. All of these different tools actually feed into this one database. So regardless of how you're collecting that data, it still is kind of going into one location, which makes it, in my mind, pretty powerful. I mentioned that one of the ways that this group is different from other citizen science data collection tools is that our goal is really to get the specific data that land managers need and get it into their hands. And the way that we're doing that is by coordinating with the land managers themselves. So in the early stages of this project, we're restricting our scope to North Florida and to the Panhandle. This overlaps with existing CISMAs, or Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas. These are cooperative organizations of land management professionals. And if you're not involved with your CISMAs, you should look up where your CISMA is and see if there's opportunities for you to get involved, because they're pretty fantastic organizations. So I know that this group of Master Naturalists occurs statewide, and I don't want to dissuade anybody from participating when you see that our focus area right now is just on North Florida. So even if you're outside of this area, you are welcome to join this group. We want you to have access to the training materials. We want you to report invasive species and EDMAPs in your region, as long as you have landowner permission to be there, right? The only aspect that you won't really have access to right now is that direct coordination with land managers, because that's what I'm facilitating, and then we're really focusing on North Florida right now. I should say that if this program is successful, we really hope to expand the program to the rest of the state as well. So I encourage you, if you want to get involved in some way. We're happy to have you. So any land manager in this project area or very close to it, regardless of whether they're managing public or private lands, can reach out to us and request a free survey. What we're not doing is, at this point, doing any kind of removal or treatment of invasive species. Our goal, again, is just to build this robust network of volunteers who can actually assist land management practitioners who are managing invasive species, making sure that they're getting the information that they need to be successful. Just to let you know kind of what volunteering looks like, the kind of the work through that we go. So once a land manager requests a survey, they're going to request it in a really specific location. Sometimes they have different species that they're really concerned about, and they can let us know that. The land manager and I will go through kind of a back and forth to consolidate the project, get a good understanding of what we need to do. And then I'm going to reach out to the volunteers and schedule a work day. So I'll send out a poll, let me know your availability, what have you. I'll give you some details about where we're going to be meeting and what we're going to be doing. And then we have the day the survey comes, and the volunteers will all meet at the site. And all that you need to do is dress for field work and bring your phone and bring water or snacks or whatever else you need. We'll be using an EDMAPS application on our personal phones to actually collect data. And then we just kind of hike and report what we see. It tends to be a lot of fun. We have a lot of opportunity for cross-learning. So even if you're not necessarily a plant person, if you're interested in learning about plants, you will. And I'm always happy to learn about other things that you're interested in. So I think that it's fun to have that opportunity for, cross-training. So and then once the survey data is collected from the field, I will check it over to make sure that it looks good, that it's up to snuff, and then I'll share it with the land manager who requested that survey so that they can plan their treatments. Now they know, where they need to focus their efforts, they know what species are present in the area, and they also have a rough idea of how abundant they are. So this is just a screen grab from one of our surveys that we just finished out at Noonan's Lake. And that's actually where the picture on the previous slide came from as well. And each one of these points is either one observation or several based off of, how closely they are. And I can open any of these locations and look at what species were there and look at, roughly how abundant they were. And this really helps land managers to plan their activities. So how do you get involved? Our website is our hub. This is where you can get information on volunteering. And this is also where you can submit a volunteer interest form, which goes to me. This is a screenshot of our volunteers page to our website. So you can navigate here by using this the tab along the top of the page and selecting the volunteers tab. And then the volunteer interest form is down at the bottom there. Once you submit an interest form, I'll reach out to you and get a little bit more information, and I'll have you fill out a UF volunteer form if you haven't completed one already. I think as Master Naturalist, though, you're required to have done this, so there may not be an issue with that. If you haven't, then it's a short application form, and then HR will initiate a very basic background check. Once you're cleared to volunteer, I'll connect you with the training materials that you need, and you'll go onto our email list, which is how I schedule surveys and communicate with the volunteers. There's a QR code in the next slide so that you can check out the website directly. Just hang in there. And then I should also mention that land managers are also going to our website to request their surveys. They're just going to the land management tab. And we're also going to have a calendar of events, a blog that kind of documents the cool things that we're doing and what we're seeing out in the field, and then some additional resources and links on the website. So stay tuned for those kinds of things. So here's a QR code to the website that I promised. If you take out your phone and you open your camera and you just kind of hover over that box there, it will open a link that you can follow directly to our website. That's what I have for you today. I hope that this is informative and it sounds like an exciting opportunity for you to satisfy some of your volunteer requirements for the program. And I hope it just sounds like something you want to take part in generally. We need help with invasive species stuff, and it tends to be a lot of fun when we have different folks come out and help us out. So I'm happy to take any questions now or later. My contact info is here. Email me, call me, what have you. And I think we'll be putting another post in the Master Naturalist Facebook group, like a call for volunteers. So there's a little bit more of a reminder, I guess, a nudge to go ahead and get involved.
Great, thank you, Chris. That was really a nice, tight, and informative presentation. Does anybody, what it would be useful probably to put the website URL in the chat. I
Oh,
put the
yeah.
SISMA URL in the chat as well. So if you guys
Yes.
might want to copy that and stick that onto your computer or phone or whatever. Does anyone have any questions for Christian?
I see there's something in chat. I haven't looked at it yet. Oh, someone put this is my link. Thank you.
I did that.
Okay.
So,
John Doe.
that's right. Yeah, that's a long story. Anyway,
All right.
Thank
I'm
you.
putting the link to the website into the chat now.
Kristen, this is Jim Behunick. I'm here in Citrus County, and I appreciate your efforts today, sir.
Thank you.
What I'm finding out is that I have an invasive species that's at least listed through the system that I've did research with University of Florida. And
Okay.
what it is I'm talking about the moringa tree.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious because we're working with the Department of Agriculture and different various organizations and using it as a fodder for our cattle organization.
Okay.
And curious if there's some way that we can possibly incorporate the advancement of such a species, maybe register as far as where they're planting and that kind of stuff, so we don't get it out of control. But I was also curious, how do we remove the moringa tree from the invasive species?
So as far as reporting it, I should say that we have a lot of flexibility as to what species that we are, as a volunteer group, reporting. Basically, anything that's listed as invasive by almost any organization in Florida is in our database on EdMaps. So I should double check and make sure that moringa is in there, actually, because I don't know that it is. So that's a good thing to be aware of. So yeah, there's absolutely support for going ahead and reporting that, and it would be great, I think, to have better data on the distribution of moringa.
Well, what's convenient about our particular organization, the Grow Moringa Collective, we have over 300 farmers here within the state of Florida that are producing moringa, and we want to make sure that we work hand in hand with the invasive species type situations.
Yeah. And what was your
go ahead, Kristen.
you had a second question there about listing moringa. Was that accurate, Jim? I want to make sure I address that.
Yes, that's correct. It's right now it's listed as an invasive species, but we like to work with hand in hand with the Department of Agriculture and our cattlemen associations, and basically we're finding out too that you can make a moringa fertilizer, so it would eliminate the nitrates running off into our springs. So there's
Gotcha.
So there are various ways that plants get assessed for invasive species, and that's regulatory. The scientific aspect of it is, I put a link in there. It's called the IFAS assessment. University of Florida uses tools to document whether or not an introduced species is either likely to become invasive, is demonstrated invasive, etc., which is informative. But yeah, so I don't know that Christian's project would be able to assist with challenging the invasive definitions of any particular plant. It's more of a survey.
Yes, sir. There might not be a need for challenging the invasiveness, but maybe work hand in hand and create a method so that individuals that do have these type of situations, that it can work hand in hand with those that are, trying to stop the spread.
Yeah, that's that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great.
And reporting it is absolutely one of those first steps. If you're finding it growing outside of cultivation, especially if you know the property, the manager of the property that it's popping up on, it's something you probably want to communicate, or the data that we can generate, we can provide that to those folks who want to do that kind of control.
Again, thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? I see one from Ryan.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have listed basically every invasive species from any list in Florida. Does that include species that are at high risk of invasion, or just things that are officially listed as invasive?
And that's a great question. So in the EdMaps platform right now, there are only the things that have been listed invasive, primarily through regulatory lists like Florida Department of Agriculture or federal noxious weeds, and then also includes the Florida Invasive Species Council Category 1 and 2 species. There is always the option to add more. So if there is a specific high-risk species from the IFAS assessment that we really want to collect more information on, I can always add that to our list, and we can add that to the queue of things we're looking at.
That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. Karen, I see a question from you.
Yeah, so I'm going to reach out to you by email because we have a lot to talk about because I'm in Leon County and I actively do invasive plant monitoring and removal where I live,
Fantastic.
but I also am teaching Marty's class on invasive plants twice a year, which is as often as I can drum up interest in it because I would teach it 10 times a year if I could. So I wanted to ask if you had familiarity with his class because I mean, there's 4 the people have to pay for it. That's what I'm seeing the main difference between what you're doing. But the first module is overview of invasive plant problem, and the second module is plant identification. So that fits right in. And then we do the third module is focusing on upland invasive specific problematic ones. Like these are how you identify this one. This is how you look out for it. This is how you remove it. And then the fourth module is aquatic invasives. And so I just thought, like, yes, people should take your free class, but you could also steer them into Marty's classes.
Yes.
And that would be fantastic. And
Yes.
then I can steer people into your class, and I'm totally willing to take my, 20 to 40 students I get, 20 to 50 students a year I get, and just funnel them into your program.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that you're in Leon because Leon is like one of my new focal points, right?
Yeah.
I'm good in Alachua and in Central Florida. I've got the connections, but as I move into the Panhandle, that's where I need the more.
Okay. Yeah. So the lady who controls invasives on the Miccosukee Greenway, she is really interested in removing the invasives and dealing with it, and she needs on the ground help with people monitoring.
Fantastic.
So that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. So definitely email me. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
In the interest of covering kind of what you mentioned, though, yes, I deliberately kind of kept the information in our short course to be as short and as accessible as possible. I have spoken to Dr. Main and looked over the teaching materials, and they go much more depth. I would love to have the time to do that. But a lot of our volunteers, I have to recognize, are not going to be master naturalists, and they're going to be much more casual people. And I wanted to make sure that they still had like the bare minimum so that they were, effective.
Yeah. And so you can just say, if you want to learn more, here's this other course you can take. And that would be great. Because I get a lot of general people who don't have any background in plants, but they still signed up for the class.
Yes. So I need to submit my request to teach that course, Dr. Main. That's what we're here. Awesome.
Yeah.
We
But
can do some things.
yeah, but I teach that course. I'm very comfortable with teaching it. And so, but I just need more students to take it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe we can work together on some targeted advertising.
Yeah, totally. That sounds good. All right. I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Karen.
Yeah.
Ryan, I see you have another question.
Yeah, so let's say for anyone who's in Central or South Florida and they'd still like to do surveys, would you suggest they reach out to the land managers directly? Or do you suggest like there's a process, or like what did you end up doing, right, to end up jumpstarting your program?
Yeah. So the first thing that I will say is that I've worked a little bit on the public agency side, so I already have some connection to the folks who are working in the area. If you are interested in doing targeted surveys at this point, what I'm going to suggest that you do is you look at the organizations that are active in your area. So whether it's like an FWC property or a Florida park, you can reach out to those organizations, and they all have their own volunteer capacity in some way or another. So you're welcome to like take our training and take the things that you're learning from this program and apply it as a volunteer for other folks at the moment. You wouldn't be a UF volunteer at this point because I'm not coordinating those surveys for you. But I'm still happy to be a resource and to try to connect you with folks as much as possible. But yeah, until we're able to get, program coverage for the entire state, it's kind of like a liability thing that I don't think we can call you a UF volunteer when it's outside of the scope.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think that's fantastic. And I really want to encourage you, to use our materials and to, to volunteer as much as you can. But yeah, so communicate if you have any more questions about that. You can email me or whatever.
Ryan, I'll add just a toss into the Everglades SISMA and the Southwest Florida SISMA, and those can be found on the chat there in that link at the top, are very active, and they regularly do sort of group activities. So, for example, the Everglades SISMA was working on eradicating an invasive mangrove on the East Coast. The Southwest Florida just did an invasive fish roundup. So could look into those groups as well. You don't have to necessarily be an employee for an agency.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in with that, Dr. Main. That is a really good point.
Anybody else? Well, we've recorded this presentation and we'll make it available to folks and encourage people to look at it. Karen, thank you so much